So tonight, what I want to do is I want to pick up on a theme uh, called the Dragon and the Treasure. And what prompted this was I've been fascinated as to some of the common themes that have crisscrossed different cultures at different times in different folklore. And this was one that I had not known about. It's the idea of a dragon that sits on top of gold, a pile of gold, and protects it. That's its sole job is just to protect it. And as I ran across this, I was thinking a little bit about how many times in our own lives we hold on to things, our treasures, and we protect them with all of our might. And many times we do not find uh, value in the sense of using it and so forth. Probably a china cabinet's a good example of how we have a lot of stuff in there, but we tend to just kind of put it in place and we don't really enjoy it as much as we possibly could. So this particular study here comes out of something that I think you might find interesting, especially when you take a look at how this creeps into every culture, no matter what culture we're living in. So there's this image that pops up in the storytelling of different cultures, and the dragon is sitting on top of a mountain of gold and he is allowing the jewels to glimmer in the darkness. And he's an individual that never spends the gold, shares the gold, or even enjoys the gold. All he does his entire life is to guard it. And so his existence becomes protecting what he possesses. And I think that's the key line here for us tonight is many times we spend our lives trying to protect what we possess. And the reason I chose this for tonight is uh, I had a whole crawl space full of treasures that I kept over almost 30 years in the same house. And when we were sorting through it, we forgot that we even had it. And many times we didn't enjoy what was up there. It was all boxed up. And as a result of that, I was thinking, my goodness, if we could have just enjoyed a lot of this, we might have been decluttering along the way rather than hoarding it and holding on to it and then making it a huge task when you move from one house to the other on trying to get rid of things that you don't use anymore because it no longer fits into the house. So this image here goes across different cultures. And I found this fascinating. The first one comes from Norse mythology. And this is one of the earliest tales of the dragon that's sitting on gold. And it's the story of Fafnir, who was a dwarf. And he was a greedy individual. He murdered his dad in this folklore to get a hold of the hoard of money. And as a result of that, he transforms into this serpent. And the rest of his life, all he does is guard it. So it's a symbol in many respects here of greed, even though across some cultures, dragons are seen as a symbol of strength. But in this particular story, he had this desire to hoard the treasure of his father, and it led to his transformation from being human into a dragon. And as a dragon, he breathed poison onto the land that surrounded his father's house that would prevent other people from coming near to his treasure. Eventually, there was an individual that slays him by the name of Sigurd, and he is considered the hero because he's able to conquer the monster. They go, where do they come up with these stories? But the bigger question is, how does it translate into different cultures? So we go from Norse mythology to Greece. And in ancient Greece, the word for dragon was drakon, which means to watch, which is an interesting translation. These individuals are where they are to watch over things and protect that. There was the name of a dragon named Ladon, who is a serpent, and he is portrayed as having 100 heads. And his sole purpose was to guard the golden apples, as you can see in this picture. And in the mythology, Ladon is this coiled serpent around a tree. Again, here we are again, this idea of a serpent, a tree that goes all the way back to Genesis, seems to find itself in different cultures. And he is an individual that is given the task by the goddess Hera, and he is to protect all of these things, and eventually he is overcome by Hercules. Third representation, and maybe this is one that you're more familiar with because sometimes in school this is required reading, and that is Beowulf. And this is an Anglo-Saxon epic, and it's the oldest surviving work of English literature. And again, it's this idea of a dragon that guards this forgotten treasure in this coastal barrow. And in the tale, Beowulf, the hoard is an ancient cursed treasure that was buried in a stone barrow by the last survivor of a doomed race. And this treasure has been guarded by a dragon for 300 years, and it triggers this final conflict in this poem, very long poem, where this slave steals a golden cup, ultimately leading to Beowulf's death and the reburial of the gold. So these three examples, I think, are illustrating a common theme of pride, greed, and heroism that seems to cycle through different cultures. Now, what this pertains to is the question, why do these dragons hoard the treasure? It seems to be a symbol of the destructive power of greed, that we never have enough, and we need the next thing to feel secure. So in this European mythology, these storytellers, I think, are talking about people that amass enormous amounts of wealth. They never use it to help anybody else. They don't share it. And it embodies this idea that many times in their effort to protect what they have, it often leads to their own isolation and ruin because all they do is to live to protect that which they have. This symbolism seems to have reflected different values in Germanic and Anglo-Saxon society, where generosity and the distribution of wealth is a mark of honorable leadership, to be able to help other people with the resources that we have. This dragon's hoard represents not prosperity, but wealth that is used useless because it's obtained and held by selfishness and excess. So, how does that lead into a Bible study? Well, I think what it helps us to see, and we're going to look at a couple of passages in a moment, is that there is a basic fear sometimes that runs through the hearts of individuals. And we are fearful of scarcity, we're fearful of loss, we're fearful of someone else getting what we feel they don't deserve. And so it's this idea many times that the dragon is not so much the treasure itself, but the dragon is one who protects those possessions so much that it becomes an isolating prison of their own design. And so the dragon thinks he owns the gold, but in reality, the gold is owning the dragon because he doesn't do anything else. All he does is protect what he feels is his. So Jesus often talks about treasures, and he doesn't talk about dragons, but it's a good metaphor. And as we reflect upon kind of the dragons that live inside of us, many of these impulses that we have are created by some of the same things: fear, scarcity, and the endless desire for more. And there is a story told when a man comes to Jesus one time, and evidently there was a dispute about a family inheritance. And he's trying to pull Jesus into this family dispute. And we read the story in Luke chapter 12. So I want to read this story for you. And it's interesting how Jesus addresses the topic here. So in Luke chapter 12, we read in verse 13, 12, 13. It's a parable, but it's based upon, I think, things that happen in the real world. It reads, someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Jesus replied, Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbitrator between you? In other words, Jesus is saying, that's a family matter. Why are you pulling me in to this situation? And then he said to them, Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. So he tells them, listen, you got to be careful. Your desire to grab the inheritance, to control the inheritance, can lead to all kinds of different things. And this is how he illustrates it. He tells a parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, You have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. That's the statement of security. But God said to him, You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. And interesting that Jesus is saying, we never know what tomorrow holds. And here is this farmer who could have done something very honorable by helping other people who may not have had the type of crop production that he had, or other people who might have been in debt in some way. But rather than sharing or helping, he's going to hoard it. He's going to hold on to it, and he's not going to help anyone else. And you know it is at a critical point when he makes this statement: I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. In other words, um, even the security I have of all this grain in the barns that I have, it's still not enough. I'm still not secure enough. And so he's going to tear down his barns and build bigger ones, which is a cost in and of itself. He's tearing down something that he owns to build something bigger. And he, in his heart, is wanting more. And it comes out in the way he's treating his family when he's insistent on taking more of the inheritance, not realizing that in the process, he has set himself up for great disappointment, because he will no longer have control over that inheritance, because his own life will be cut short than what he thinks it will. And then he says, this is how it will be for those who store up the things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Well, how is this man rich toward God? Well, we read in the next verse, Jesus goes into a teaching and he says, therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. So he's saying our concentration on having more because it makes us feel more secure or more important, or it makes us in some ways feel a sense of accomplishment. He says, no, no, consider God. Being rich toward God is having a faith that will trust in tomorrow. And he says, consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds. Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Then he switches from the animal world to the flowers. Consider how the wild flowers grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I will tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it. For the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. He says, sell your possessions and give to the poor. And I think that line is probably the main point of his lesson. He's saying, look beyond yourself. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So what we find is in the parable that is given, the man never stops to ask, well, I have all of this. Is there someone I can help? What responsibility do I have to help other people with the resources that I have? And his imagination is consumed by storage and protection, more barns, more accumulation, and so forth. So he kind of becomes like the dragon that in all of these mythologies sits atop of a growing pile of treasure, but never actually uses it, that could be defined as being rich toward God. Jesus actually calls him a fool, not because he's rich, that's not the point, but because he mistakes possessions for a rich life. And his problem is not his wealth, his problem is his fear. Fear disguised as wisdom, thinking more and more and more will make me safe, when in reality, he does not have more time. And as a result of that, fear has consumed him, and it has led him into such a way that he has not been as rich toward God and toward other people as he could have. So there is the power of possessions. And we live in a world where it is constant that we need more until you come to that moment of insight. And I think that's what this move has helped us see. Geez, we have so much stuff. How did we get all this stuff? Well, in the moments that we have, instead of getting rid of stuff to be replaced with something maybe that we'd like, we hoard it. We might need it, that type of thing. And as a result of that, you just keep accumulating and you sit on a pile of stuff. And as a result of that, it doesn't help other people. It just sits there. And sometimes it rusts, and sometimes moths get to it, and those type of things that actually destroy the value of it. So when we begin collecting things, not because we need them necessarily, um, but it gives us something inside that makes us feel either security or protection or satisfaction or pleasure. And it's not just money. It can be all kinds of things. It could be status or achievements. Um, all those things that give us a certain sense of certainty. And as a result of that, it can become, metaphorically speaking, a pile of gold, um, and a dragon's hoard. There's a misspell, a dragon's hoard, where he's holding on to it. He's protecting it. He's not going to allow anybody else near it. So I want to read to you another passage. This is out of Matthew, and you can see by the chapter number that this comes out of the Sermon on the Mount. So Matthew 5 through 7 is the Sermon on the Mount. And in chapter 6, Jesus addresses a very similar topic to the Luke passage. Here he says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." Then he gets back in to many of the same things that's in the Luke passage. He says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you'll eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear." And he says the same thing. He gets back into the flowers of the field and so forth. This time, at the end, though, he says this, verse 33, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." Concentrate on today and realize that tomorrow, while it can bring us concern, God is already there into our tomorrows. So Jesus is giving a different vision. He talks about birds and lilies, but what I think he's really getting to is a God whose economy is not rooted in scarcity, but in abundance of love, abundance of comfort, abundance of assurance, those type of things. Um, Abundance is not a luxury. Abundance is an act of trust and contentment. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to get to in this passage here. So we might ask the question, because it often comes up, well, there's not enough for everyone. There's not enough treasure for everyone. And so we see it in our politics and policies. We want to pour our money into all kinds of things, whether it's a war, whether it's into the Pentagon or into other projects, but there's not enough resources for people that really need it, whether it's healthcare, whether it is food, whether it is housing, those type of things. The kingdom of God, though, is kind of built on this idea that there is enough for everyone if we are willing to share. And it begins with love and peace and mercy. And that's what gives us hope when we're able to help others. And when these possessions are shared, they actually multiply, because when you give love, you receive more love. When you give grace, you receive grace. When you give mercy, you receive mercy, and so forth. So, in all of this, the dragon is really the obstacle between his fears and his willingness to meet and help the needs of other people. And so we kind of sit on piles of gold, you might say, not money, but it can be all kinds of different things. We sit on and it's our hoard and we try to protect it. And it many times is seen as wisdom. You're planning for tomorrow. But sometimes what happens, it reduces our time, it reduces our compassion, it reduces the things that other people really do need. And so to have a generous heart is critical as I kind of read what Jesus is doing in these two passages here. So the dragon kind of lives by a lie. And you could fill in the blank. If I just had blank, I'd finally feel secure. And that could be more money, better health, could be retirement, it could be all kinds of different things. But Ecclesiastes 5:10 says, whoever loves money never has enough. When does a person feel the satisfaction of what they've achieved? Or is it the next achievement? Is it the next million, whatever it may be? So the treasure begins guarding the dragon. That's the flip of this story. The dragon is guarding the treasure, but then the treasure begins to guard the dragon from being able to enjoy life and be rich toward others and toward God. So the treasure owns the dragon. And when that happens, we continue to be filled with anxiety and worry, jealousy and greed, and those type of things. So what the dragon really needs to do is come out of the cave. And God is inviting all of us out of the cave of fear and scarcity and endless accumulation and invites us in to a life that is more than what we possess, but using what we possess to share and help with other people. Now, I found this two quotes. Very dramatic. So on the left is the owner of Fox News, Rupert Murdoch. He's like in his 90s now. And on the right is Jon Stewart, a comedian, Comedy Central, The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, you can catch on YouTube. So listen to the way Rupert Murdoch looks at life. He says, I don't care about journalism or truth. I realized early on that manufacturing absolute paranoia and racial grievance is incredibly profitable. I aggressively programmed the working class to violently hate their own neighbors so my billionaire friends can quietly gut the country. That's 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 come out of the mouth of someone who's incredibly rich and incredibly powerful and owns a news network. I put news in quotes um, to continue to condition people to constantly be afraid of the other who's going to take away something when in reality they're working behind the scenes to actually take from the people that they are programming. Now, Jon Stewart says this in response to Rupert Murdoch. You built $1 billion empire out of pure concentrated poison. You deliberately broke the brains of an entire generation, turning grandpas into terrified, heavily armed fascists strictly to protect your untaxed wealth. You are the most destructive sociopath force. I found those two quotes incredibly poignant. And, Jon Stewart is a rich individual too. He's a successful comedian and stuff. But is he trying to get more by duping other people? If you follow Jon Stewart, yes, he's a comedian, but he is an individual that is constantly fighting on behalf of the working poor. He's trying to constantly intercede on behalf of veterans who have come back from
their service with post-traumatic stress syndrome, and their benefits have been pulled out from under them. Do a little research on John Stewart. He is an individual that is not a Christian. He's not a believer, but he gets it. He gets taking care of each other is incredibly important. So here's how I want to conclude our study, and then I'll stop the recording. The dragon's compulsive hoarding behavior mirrors kind of our own psychological conditions at times. Um, these creatures that have vast wealth but don't have any pleasure from it. They can't eat the gold, can't truly use most artifacts, and they live in isolated misery. They become a prisoner of their own possessions. And I guess that's the lesson I've been learning this past month as I've been boxing up stuff. I don't own this stuff. It almost owns me, you know, because of how much time and effort and energy it has taken to just begin to sort through that. So I'm just telling you my story a little bit through this mythological image that is found in different cultures. So let me stop the recording, and we'll talk a little bit.